The worst part wasn't that my wife, Chloe, left me for another man. It was the gut-wrenching, freeing wave of absolute relief that washed over me the moment she finally said it out loud. I'm Ethan. And I never thought I'd be the guy telling this story, but here we are. See, I wasn't some romantic hero in our marriage. Not the grand gesture type. I was the guy who remembered to pay the bills on time, who fixed things when they broke, who made sure we had groceries and clean towels in our home in Atlanta. The infrastructure guy. Stable, reliable, the kind of husband who didn't forget anniversaries or important dates. And for years, I honestly thought that was enough. Chloe seemed content with that arrangement, too. Or at least, I believed she was. We had routines. We had systems. We had a life that looked perfect on paper. But somewhere along the way, she started looking for something I apparently couldn't give her. Excitement. Spontaneity. That electric feeling you get when everything is new and shiny. I started noticing the changes about 6 months before everything finally imploded. She'd come home from the gym later than usual. Her phone would light up with messages, and she'd quickly swipe away. Our conversations, which used to flow so naturally, suddenly felt like I was pulling teeth. I'm not the jealous type, not one to check phones or demand explanations. But I'm also not blind. There were new habits forming. She'd shower immediately after getting home, a new perfume clinging to her. She started dressing differently, even for quick errands. And there was this distance in her eyes when she looked at me, like she was mentally somewhere else entirely. I knew something was shifting, but I didn't want to be that husband who creates drama over suspicions. The gym, apparently, was where it began. His name was Julian. One of those guys who just radiate confidence and charm. The type who knows exactly what to say to make someone feel seen and special. I never met him during that time, but I'd hear his name dropped casually in Chloe's stories. Julian suggested this new workout routine, or Julian knows this great place for smoothies. I wasn't oblivious. I could read between the lines, but confronting it meant facing something I wasn't sure I was ready to handle. Then came the night that changed everything. We were in the kitchen. She was scrolling through her phone while I was cleaning up after dinner, and the silence between us felt heavier than concrete. I dried my hands on a towel, turned to her, and asked the question I'd been avoiding for weeks: is there someone else? I kept my voice calm. No accusation. Just a simple question that needed an answer. She froze for a second, her thumb hovering over her screen, and then she looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not exactly. More like resignation mixed with defiance. Yes, she said. Just that one word, clean and direct. No apology attached to it. I nodded slowly, feeling that strange relief again. Like finally having confirmation of a gnawing uncertainty was easier than living with it. Then you need to make a choice, I told her, my tone still even and measured. I'm not going to live with ghosts in this house. I'm not going to be the backup plan while you figure out what you want. She didn't argue. Didn't try to explain or justify. She just stood up from the table and walked toward our bedroom. I heard drawers opening and closing, the sound of her pulling out a suitcase from the closet. I stayed in the kitchen because I genuinely didn't know what else to do. Part of me expected her to come back, to say she'd made a mistake, that she wanted to work on us. But that didn't happen. She packed methodically, taking her essentials and leaving everything else for later. And when she walked past me with her bags, she paused for just a moment. I'll come back for the rest of my things tomorrow, she said, not meeting my eyes. And then she was gone. The apartment felt different after she left. Not empty, exactly, but lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying an extra weight I didn't realize was there. I didn't cry or break things or call her 100 times, begging her to reconsider. I just sat on the couch and processed what had happened. My first instinct wasn't to chase her or fight for her. It was to protect myself from further damage. That night, I started separating our lives in practical terms. I went through our shared accounts and made a list of everything that needed to be divided: bank accounts, subscriptions, utility bills, all the boring infrastructure of a shared life. I changed passwords on accounts that were mine. I removed her access to things she didn't need anymore. And I created a simple spreadsheet tracking everything we'd need to settle. It wasn't vindictive. It was just practical, the way I'd always handled problems, by breaking them down into manageable steps. Over the next few days, Chloe sent occasional texts asking about random items she'd left behind or questions about bills. I responded with short, factual answers. I wasn't cold. I wasn't warm. I was just neutral. My sister, Sophia, called me during that first week asking if I was okay, and I told her honestly that I was fine. I'm not angry, I explained to her. I'm just done. There's a difference. Sophia understood me better than most people. She knew I wasn't the type to make dramatic gestures or seek revenge. I was the type to quietly close doors and move forward. Chloe moved in with Julian almost immediately, which told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been brewing. Mutual friends started reaching out with that awkward energy of people who'd heard what happened, and I appreciated their concern, but didn't want to rehash the details. What was there to say? My wife had chosen excitement over stability, passion over partnership. And while it hurt, it wasn't exactly surprising. I'd felt her slipping away for months, I just hadn't wanted to admit it to myself. The strange thing about betrayal is that once the initial shock wears off, you start seeing all the signs you missed or ignored. I remembered nights when she'd claimed to be too tired for intimacy, only to have the energy to text someone else until late at night. I remembered weekends when she'd suddenly have plans with friends I'd never met. I remembered the way she'd started picking fights over small things, like she was trying to justify her actions by painting me as inadequate. None of it was dramatic or obvious in the moment. But looking back, the pattern was clear. I spent those first couple of weeks reorganizing my life without her. I moved furniture around to change the energy of the apartment. I donated things that reminded me too much of us. And I established new routines that belonged only to me. I wasn't wallowing or spiraling. I was methodically rebuilding, because that's what I do. I solve problems. I create systems. I move forward. And honestly, once I adjusted to the idea that she was gone, I started feeling better than I had in months. 3 weeks after Chloe walked out, I was sitting at my desk going through some paperwork when my phone buzzed with a message from Sophia. Chloe was in a car accident. Julian didn't make it. The words sat on my screen for a moment while my brain tried to process what I was reading. I wasn't happy. I wasn't relieved. I wasn't anything except shocked and maybe a little numb. Whatever anger I'd had toward Julian had faded into indifference by that point, and now he was gone just like that. And Chloe was in the hospital. Sophia sent another message a few seconds later with more details. They'd been driving back from somewhere late at night. Another car ran a red light. Julian was gone at the scene, and Chloe was in serious condition with multiple injuries. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to figure out what I was supposed to feel. Part of me knew the decent thing was to feel sympathy, and I did genuinely, because nobody deserves to go through something like that. But another part of me, the part that had spent the last 3 weeks rebuilding my life and processing betrayal, knew that this changed nothing between us. A tragedy doesn't erase the choices people make. It doesn't rewind time or undo damage. I texted Sophia back asking which hospital, and she told me she was already planning to visit, that someone needed to check on Chloe since her parents lived several hours away and couldn't get there immediately. I appreciated that about my sister. She had a good heart and didn't let personal feelings stop her from doing what seemed right. I told Sophia I wasn't going to the hospital myself, not because I wanted Chloe to suffer alone, but because my presence there would be confusing for everyone involved. I sent my thoughts through Sophia, and I meant it. But I also knew that showing up would send the wrong message, like maybe I was reconsidering everything. And I wasn't. Over the next few days, Sophia kept me updated. Chloe had a broken leg, some fractured ribs, a concussion, and she'd need several weeks of recovery time with limited mobility. The doctors said she'd heal completely, but needed help with basic tasks during the recovery period. Her parents had arrived and were handling the immediate crisis, making medical decisions and dealing with insurance and all the chaos that follows something like this. I felt bad for her. I really did. But I also felt this strange certainty that my role in her life was finished. Sophia visited Chloe a couple of times and reported back that she was devastated, not just physically, but emotionally, grieving Julian, while also dealing with the reality of her situation. I listened and said the appropriate things, but I kept my distance. Then, about 10 days after the incident, Sophia told me Chloe had been asking about me, wanting to know if I'd be willing to talk. I thought about it for a day before responding, and finally told Sophia I'd be willing to meet Chloe once, in a public place, just to have a conversation and nothing more. We settled on a quiet cafe on Maple Street, somewhere neutral where neither of us had memories attached. Chloe's mom helped her inside when I arrived, and I saw immediately how much the accident had affected her. She was moving carefully, clearly in pain, with her leg in a cast and bruises still visible on her face and arms. I stood up when she approached, and her mom gave me this look that was half gratitude and half judgment before leaving us alone. Chloe settled into her chair, slowly, wincing as she adjusted her position, and for a minute, neither of us said anything. Finally, she spoke. Her voice quieter than I remembered, telling me she wanted to come home, that she needed help and couldn't do this alone. She didn't say it like a request. It was more like a statement of fact, like, of course, I would take her back now that Julian was gone and she was hurt. I took a breath and chose my words carefully. There is no home anymore. Not for us together. I kept my voice gentle but firm, explaining that there was an apartment, there were addresses, but there was no home, not the way she meant it. She looked at me like I'd slapped her, genuine shock registering on her face. She couldn't believe I was serious, pointing out that she was hurt, that she needed someone, reminding me that I was her husband. The past tense hung in the air between us. I reminded her that I was her husband when she left me for someone else, when she chose him over our marriage, when she moved into his place, when she built a new life that didn't include me. She started to cry, and I felt the pull of old instincts, the part of me that wanted to comfort her and fix things. But I knew that giving in to that impulse would destroy me. I explained that this wasn't about punishment or revenge or making her suffer. I didn't want that. But I also couldn't be the safety net she fell back on because her other choice didn't work out. Chloe wiped her eyes and tried a different approach, asking where she was supposed to go, what she was supposed to do, saying her parents couldn't take care of her forever. The desperation in her voice was real, and I understood it. But understanding someone's pain doesn't mean you're obligated to absorb it yourself. I told her that her parents were helping her now, and that's what parents do. That she had friends, she had resources, that she'd figure it out the same way anyone figures out difficult situations, but I couldn't be that person for her anymore. She accused me of being cruel. Then said I was abandoning her when she needed someone most. And I let her say it because I knew how it looked from her perspective. From where she sat, injured and grieving and scared, I probably did seem heartless. But I also knew that taking her back now would be building on a foundation of obligation and guilt rather than genuine reconciliation. And that's not fair to either person. I told her that I genuinely hoped she'd heal completely and find whatever she was looking for in life, but I wouldn't be her solution to a problem that started when she made choices I wasn't part of. The conversation went in circles for a while. Her trying different angles to make me reconsider. Me holding my boundary as kindly as I could. Eventually, I could see she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. And I suggested we end things there. Before we parted, I told her I was willing to handle the practical matters of our separation properly and fairly. I'll make sure you get everything that's yours. We'll divide things correctly, and I'll do it all transparently so there's no confusion. I explained that I wanted to do it officially, with everything documented, so we both had closure and could move forward. She nodded weakly, probably too tired to argue anymore, and her mom came back to help her to the car. I watched them leave and felt this mix of sadness and resolution, like closing a book you never finished, but also knowing you'll never pick up again. That night, I started making plans for how to handle the separation properly. I wasn't going to ghost her or make things difficult, but I also wasn't going to let guilt manipulate me into undoing all the progress I'd made. I decided that everything needed to happen with witnesses present, in a neutral space, with clear documentation of every decision. No private meetings where emotions could cloud judgment, no ambiguous conversations that could be misinterpreted later. I wanted clean lines and clear endings because that's the only way to truly move forward. The truth was, I felt terrible about her situation, and part of me kept questioning if I was doing the right thing. But every time I imagined taking her back, I saw the same pattern playing out, me becoming her caretaker out of obligation, her resenting me for not being Julian. Both of us trapped in a relationship held together by guilt rather than love. That's not a marriage. That's a prison sentence for two people. What she needed was genuine care from people who chose to give it freely, not reluctant help from someone she'd already rejected. Her parents were there for her. They had the emotional capacity to help without the baggage of betrayal clouding every interaction. I would have been helping her while simultaneously reliving the pain of her leaving. And that's not sustainable for anyone. Sophia called me that evening and asked how it went. I told her simply that I'd held my ground, that I was going to make sure everything got handled the right way, with respect, but also with boundaries. My sister was quiet for a moment, then said she was proud of me, that it couldn't have been easy, but that I was doing what I needed to do for my own well-being. That validation meant more than she probably knew. Because in moments like these, you need someone to confirm you're not crazy for protecting yourself. The next few days were quiet, and I used that time to prepare for the final separation, gathering documents, organizing our shared assets, and creating a clear plan for how everything would be divided. I pulled out that spreadsheet I created the night she left and started filling in the details, adding receipts, highlighting discrepancies, making sure everything was accounted for. This wasn't about being petty. This was about being thorough, about making sure we could both walk away with a clear understanding of where things stood. 2 weeks after that cafe meeting, I sent Chloe a message through Sophia with a date, time, and location, the community room in my apartment building on a Saturday afternoon. I told her to bring whoever she wanted for support, that this was going to be a proper, witness separation of our lives, everything documented and transparent. She probably thought I was being dramatic or cold, but I knew exactly what I was doing, creating a situation where emotions couldn't override facts, where there'd be no confusion about what was said or agreed upon. I spent the days before that meeting organizing everything meticulously. I had folders with bank statements, receipts, documents showing every shared expense from our marriage, and I'd separated everything into clear categories. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying to close this chapter of my life in a way that left no loose ends, no reasons to contact each other months later over forgotten details. I also packed up all of Chloe's remaining belongings, clothes she'd left behind, personal items, photos, small things she'd accumulated over the years. Everything went into labeled boxes and bags, organized and ready to hand over. The morning of the meeting, I arrived at the community room early and set everything up like I was preparing for a business presentation. I had the boxes stacked neatly along one wall, the folders of documents on the table, and I'd even brought a laptop in case we needed to reference anything digital. Sophia arrived first, offering to be there as my support, and I appreciated her presence more than I could express. A friend of mine named Liam showed up, too. Someone who'd known both Chloe and me during our marriage, and he sat quietly in the corner as a neutral observer. Chloe arrived about 10 minutes late, her mom helping her navigate with her leg still in a cast. She looked around the room with this expression of disbelief, like she couldn't understand why I'd made such a production out of this. Her mom looked uncomfortable, probably sensing that this wasn't going to be the emotional reconciliation Chloe might have hoped for. I gestured for them to sit, and once everyone was settled, I began walking through everything systematically. I started with the easy stuff, returning her personal belongings, going through each box and confirming she had everything she needed. Chloe nodded along, not saying much, maybe still processing the formality of it all. Then I moved on to the financial documents. And this is where things got more complicated. I created a detailed breakdown of our shared accounts, showing every deposit and withdrawal from the past year. I explained calmly that I divided everything 50-50 when it came to legitimate shared expenses, rent, utilities, groceries, things we'd both benefited from during our marriage. Chloe seemed fine with that part, even relieved that I was being fair. But then I pulled out a separate folder, and I could see her tense up. I'd gone through our credit card statements and bank records from the months before she left, and I'd identified expenses that were clearly related to her relationship with Julian. Hotel rooms, dinners at restaurants we never went to together, gifts I knew weren't for me, even a weekend trip she'd claimed was for work. I'd highlighted every single one, added them up, and calculated her share of what had been spent from our joint accounts. This isn't about revenge, I said, keeping my voice steady and factual, explaining that these were expenses that came from money we'd both contributed to, used for a relationship that excluded me entirely, and that I wanted to be reimbursed for my portion. The room got very quiet. Chloe's mom started to object, saying I was being petty and vindictive, but I calmly explained that I was simply asking for what was fair. If she'd used her own money for those expenses, I wouldn't have said anything. But she'd used our shared resources for something that benefited only her and someone else. Chloe looked like she wanted to disappear, but she didn't argue the facts because they were right there in black and white. I told her I didn't need the money immediately, that we could set up a payment plan, but this needed to be acknowledged and settled. Then came the part that I knew would hurt the most, but it was necessary. I brought paperwork removing myself as her emergency contact on everything. Medical forms, insurance documents, bank accounts, anywhere my name appeared as the person to call in a crisis. I slid the papers across the table and explained that I was giving her 3 months to transition everything. That during those 3 months, I'd maintained some basic support connections to give her time to reorganize. But after that, I needed to be completely separated from any obligation to her. Chloe's eyes filled with tears, and she asked quietly how I could just cut her off like this, how I could be so cold when she was still recovering. I took a breath and tried to make her understand without being cruel. I explained that being someone's emergency contact, being their backup plan, being the person they fall back on, that's a choice, not an obligation, and it requires trust and mutual commitment. I told her that I couldn't be that person for her anymore. Not because I hated her or wanted her to suffer, but because every time my phone rang with her name on it, I'd be reliving the betrayal, wondering if she was calling because she actually needed me or because everyone else had said no first. I explained that she had parents who loved her, friends who cared about her, and she needed to build a support system with people who weren't carrying the weight of what had happened between us. Liam spoke up then, carefully, mentioning that he'd seen Chloe around town a few times during her time with Julian, and she'd seemed genuinely happy with her new direction. He said it gently, without judgment, but the implication was clear. She'd made her choice and committed to it, and now she was trying to reverse course only because circumstances had changed. It wasn't said to be cruel, just to provide context that everyone in the room was thinking, but nobody wanted to say. Chloe couldn't really argue with that observation. Her mom tried to defend her, saying that people make mistakes and deserve second chances, and I agreed with that principle generally, but explained that a second chance has to be wanted for the right reasons, not just grabbed out of desperation and fear of being alone. We spent the next hour going through the remaining details, dividing a few pieces of furniture, settling final utility bills, discussing the timeline for the actual separation to be legally finalized. I'd already consulted with a lawyer about how to handle everything. And because Chloe had left voluntarily, and the circumstances of our separation were clear, things were relatively straightforward. There were no kids, no complicated assets, just 2 people untangling their lives. Before Chloe left, she asked me one last time if I was sure about this, if there was any part of me that could forgive what happened and try again. I looked at her and felt nothing but exhausted sympathy. I do forgive you, I said quietly, and I meant it, explaining that forgiveness doesn't mean pretending something didn't happen or putting yourself back in a situation that already hurt you once. I told her I genuinely hoped she healed completely, that she found whatever she was looking for, that she built a good life for herself. But that life couldn't include me. Not anymore. Sophia helped Chloe and her mom carry the boxes out to their car. And Liam stayed behind with me as we cleaned up the community room. He told me he thought I'd handled everything with more grace than most people could manage. That holding boundaries doesn't make someone heartless, it makes them sane. After everyone left, I went back to my apartment and felt this profound sense of relief, like I'd finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying for months. The next few weeks were quiet, focused on the legal finalization of everything and making sure all the loose ends were tied up. Chloe sent a few messages through Sophia, mostly logistical questions, and I answered them all politely and briefly. I didn't engage emotionally. I just provided the information she needed and moved on. About 2 months after that meeting, I met someone new. Her name was Julia, and she was different from Chloe in almost every way. She was calm, steady, interested in building something real rather than chasing excitement. We took things slowly, and I was honest with her about what I'd been through, and she appreciated that honesty. Life started feeling normal again, not in the old way, but in a new way that actually felt healthier. I heard through mutual friends that Chloe had moved in with her parents temporarily and was working on getting back on her feet. I didn't follow up or ask for details because her life was no longer my concern. I'd given her a fair separation. I'd handled everything with as much dignity as I could manage. And now we were both free to move forward. Looking back on everything, I don't regret holding my boundary. I didn't wish her harm. I realized one day while talking with Julia about the whole situation, I just wasn't her safety net anymore. Because being someone's safety net is a choice, not a debt you owe. And I'd already paid everything I owed to that marriage. What would you have done in my situation?